looking at that area of San Diego, looking at downtown Austin, near where I live, just out of curiosity, when we were out and about a couple of days ago, I said, hey, let's take a drive down 6th Street and just see what it looks like. Because I had heard rumors and seen photographs in the newspaper of what it looked like. And the topic that we're talking about here today is turning irrational insecurities into irrational loyalty. And one of the things that I've learned through this whole just completely surreal COVID process is that we, in the absence of true information and guidance and leadership and indications of how to feel, what to think, what to do, where to go, even information coming from those boarded up businesses, we're making up terrifying stories for ourselves, right? We make up the most terrifying stories in the absence of clear information. I know for myself, when I made that drive down 6th Street, all of the things that were going through my head, this is the spiral that I went through. First of all, I was like, oh my God, our economy is completely in ruin. Austin, especially this very, very thriving part of Austin that attracts a lot of tourists. It's very much like the Gaslamp District in San Diego, but maybe more hoochie people. And, like just looking at all of these boarded up buildings, like my own feelings of fear for those businesses, for the people who work in those businesses, being insecure about food and shelter and employment and all of that kind of stuff. Lots of homeless people on the street, having a fear of like what's going to happen to those people. Then that translates into my own personal fear. I'm thinking like, is this an indication of what the economy in the place where I operate my business and my family lives and my employees and their people are like, am I going to lose the ability to provide for myself and for other people? And so it was really easy for me to get pretty spun up, right?
Yeah.
And then what that became, like that fear, what that became for me was insecurity in my own abilities, right? Like I've been running a business continuously and successfully, profitably since 2003. And my immediate thought was like seeing the boarded up windows. I'm like, those businesses, maybe they're gone forever. Like, does this signal the demise of mine? My self-worth is very tied up in my business and my identity as an entrepreneur and as a business leader and all these kinds of things. So you can probably imagine the complex feelings that I have. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring you on here, because, just like work that we have done together. And even when I saw you talking to my dad a couple of months ago, just your ability to use both your own unique experience. I'm going to let you talk all about that, but your own unique experience, your own background, paired with your experience as an entrepreneur, as a sales educator, and as a practitioner of NLP, I feel like you have this special combination of things that you can share with other people. So just for everybody who has joined the call, which we got a whole bunch of other people in there while I was giving that preamble, this series, it's called Brand New World. We gave it a name. They originally were webinars, and now they're Debinar, trademark, void where prohibited, no CODs. Right. So Brand New World is really, when we started this process, I was out there sharing with leaders, entrepreneurs, executives, people with personal brands. I was sharing, here are the things that you need to do right now to ensure that you don't mess up your brand, or that your brand doesn't unnecessarily get thrust into a crisis. We've pivoted. We are in a place where we all acknowledge that there is no going back to the world as it was before, right? We are going to a brand new world. See what I did there? I'm a branding person.
I like it.
Maybe that's the title of my next book. I don't know. And we're going into a brand new world where every brand needs to be really reimagined for this post-pandemic world in order to thrive. Nothing will ever be the same. So in some of these sessions, we've been talking about things that are just like straight business. In some of these sessions, we've been talking about things that are about the people behind the business. And this session is one of those special sessions where we're going to talk about the people behind the business. So just real quick, couple things that I'm seeing going on just in the world of brand strategy and marketing. A lot of the conversations that I am having with clients and with just with the general public and business leaders and things like that is all about, is now the right time for me to take a closer look at my brand and make sure that I am very well positioned for what I'm going to look like in the current world and the post-pandemic world. I've been saying yes, absolutely. And so a lot of the virtual speaking events that I have been doing have been like really going back to square one on how to build a brand, which one of the things that you said in the promo video that we created for this session was nothing about you has changed. And I'm telling people nothing about your core brand DNA has changed, but it is time to go back and look at it through a new lens and make sure that it is meaningful, that it is singular, that it creates those bonds of irrational loyalty, given the new condition of humanity. And that new condition of humanity is not all negative, right? There have been a lot of really incredible outcomes, like great positive outcomes of this experience for me have been things like I've become acquainted with people that I didn't previously know who have changed and will continue to change the arc of my existence, right? Like really, really good people. The other thing that has been a positive outcome of this is I have found new channels and new methods of attracting people to our business. We have actually opened up some new categories. We took our B2B technology and sort of hardcore B2B marketing expertise, and we've been able to channel that towards other types of businesses that can benefit from that kind of experience. And for instance, we've attracted a new huge client in the world of healthcare construction, right? So it's not all negative. And I wasn't really able to see the positive aspects of this until, just a couple of weeks ago, when I realized that there's a lot of goodness to take out of this. And one of the ways that I've been able to quiet some of the voices, Todd Palmer, who I think is on the call with us today, he calls it the itty bitty shitty committee in your head. One of the ways that I've been able to quiet the itty bitty shitty committee is to fill in that space and drown it out with gratitude, and to also really double down on the things that make me feel great at the stuff that I do. So I've been able to be strategic. I've been innovative. I've been able to use my gifts and my talents to connect with new people and stuff like that. So anyway, that's all I want to say is just, my key message for everybody is I'm making the pivot. I'm seeing other businesses making the pivot. I'm seeing organizations really looking at this time as a time where there might be a little bit of calm and a little slowness to focus inward, to look inside, not just inside their business and their brand, but also inside themselves as human beings. And that's that's definitely something we did with Todd a couple of weeks ago. Klyn she's a spitfire. She's an incredible human being. I want to tell you real quick how we met. I think I want to say, was it a Global Student Entrepreneur Awards thing? Yes, the U.S. finals of the Global Student Entrepreneurs Awards in Denver, Colorado. Both of us were speakers at this big finale event for the U.S. finals and judges, and it was very cool. And the way Klyn describes it is she stalked me, but we ended up running for coffee together, and we've been like this ever since. So when you find a kindred spirit, when you find somebody who aligns with your values and beliefs, you want to stay with that person. She's got an incredible personal story. She has very unique talents and gifts. She is truly a singular human being. I can say for a fact, I have never, ever in my life met anyone who is quite like her. I am proud to call her my friend. She is an expert, a best-selling author, a speaker, a coach, a trainer, an entrepreneur, and a practitioner, master practitioner. Is that correct? You got your master's? Yep. She has a master's in NLP. She is going to absolutely blow your mind. So anyway, here she is for mind blowing. I will say that this session is best consumed when you are leaning forward and you are willing to participate. So she's got a lot of interactivity built into this. So feel free to raise hands if you have questions. I'm going to be kind of monitoring. Tom, as always, is here. He's also going to be helping us monitor, make sure that we get to everybody's questions and responses. Type in the chat box. You can use the Q&A thing and raise your hand. You can type questions there. I'll be keeping track. But I'm going to go into darkness and in the background to take care of some of that stuff. Unless, of course, you need me, Kaylin. No,
I'm good.
She needs nothing. She's got Chanel. She's got her big fat brain. We're good to go. So anyway, please welcome. Thank you. I'm grateful for your friendship and I'm grateful that you were willing to do this. Let's take it away.
Yeah. So super great introduction. Thank you. Thank you. I'm fine if we go the next hour and a half, you talking about how great I am. So that'd be great. So thank you. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Scott I see you, and he's he was in my program for a while, and he's just crushing it in the field of recruiting. So if I didn't say hi to Scott, I'd be getting some nasty messages because he's such a gem. As we kick this off, yes, this is highly interactive. And what do I mean by highly interactive? Great question. We did one a couple of days ago that within it was an hour long, and there were over 147 comments. So I'm not saying this is a competition, but if it was a competition, that's where our metrics are. So feel free to just blow up the chat. Now, I also say this is a choose your own adventure. How many of you during your childhood, you read those choose your own adventure books where you'd be like, okay, you're at a crossroads, you take the road to the left, the road to the right, and then whatever happens is how it unfolds. So that's the I think you said Kristen, I got to look up, but the mind mapping, yeah, Kristen does a lot of mind mapping. Well, what's fantastic about this is we're going to teach you how to map your mind and also how to deal with those irrational insecurities and help your customers take the irrational insecurities that they have and create a loyal trust within your brand. So that's the overview. Now, sometimes I'm going to give a couple disclaimers. Sometimes this gets a little meaty. Sometimes it gets really intellectual. And sometimes you're going to be listening to me like, what the heck are you even talking about? If and when that happens to you, don't worry. So a few months ago, my fiance and I were in Maui and we decided to do goat yoga. Well, the thing about goat yoga is it's not that complicated, right? So goat yoga is the easy version of yoga. Right after I tell the yoga version of this, I'm also going to explain the goat yoga version. So if you don't get the meaty intellectual stuff, you're not alone. It took me years to master that. You're fine. Just wait till towards the end and I'll give you the goat yoga version. Now, we got to address the elephant in the room. And this is perhaps, the thing that initially most people are curious about. I have a condition known as cystic fibrosis. If anybody's heard of cystic fibrosis, please put it in the chat. Remember, we're trying to beat 147 comments just so I can rub it in the other person's face. And cystic fibrosis is indeed a life-threatening genetic condition, so I was born with it. And I spend anywhere from 1 to 6 months a year inside of hospitals. Now, it's not the hospitals in which you'd be thinking. It's actually now it's the COVID unit. So it's the hospital isolation wards, where in order to even come into my room, you have to wear gloves. You have to wear masks. You have to gown up fully. Visiting hours are restricted. When you come in my room, if you're not wearing the full garb of the face shield, the mask, the gowns, the plastic gowns, the yellow plastic gowns, and the gloves, a nurse will come in wearing her full garb and tell you you need to either leave or gown up. My birthday party this year was a complete 100% isolation birthday party. Currently, my lung function's around 75%. It ranges from 30 to 75. And I tell you all of this, yes, I actually did go to Austin and got the bat virus, which is a form of coronavirus. And then it complicates because, of course, pneumonia and all of the jazz that comes with it. So the question becomes for all of you, because it's not just about my health. The question becomes, what can living in hospitals teach you that you need to know about building your business or building your life? So if you guys have any entrepreneurs, I see a lot of you guys from EO in here, and I know Scott's personally an entrepreneur. I know Lionel's an entrepreneur. Go ahead, let me know in the comments if you're an entrepreneur, because it'll help me choose your own adventure for which examples I share in this lesson. And I share all of this initially because growing up inside of hospitals, I became obsessed with figuring out how is it some people are successful and other people, they're just not. How is it that some people can go on and build businesses and create teams and take an idea, which doesn't exist, by the way, your ideas don't exist, they're in the invisible, and bring it out to the visible. This coffee at one point was just an idea in someone's head, they brought it out to the visible. What's the difference between the person that can bring something from the invisible to the visible and survive during tough times, as opposed to what's that person who gives up? Who's the person who plays video games all day in the hospital? And inside those walls is where I discovered something called Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And I got my master's practitioner in it, as well as we can call it a minor in hypnotherapy. And it's just something that I'm incredibly passionate about, because I credit that to what has helped me to build my speaking business and do a lot of corporate coaching, corporate consulting on what it takes to get through the tough times and lead a team and the emotional toll of leadership. So with that, we're going to start out with the mind mapping piece. And as we go through the mind mapping, what's next is the insecurities side. Because whether we want to admit it or not, we're all hopelessly, desperately insecure about something at any given time. And this may not necessarily eliminate all of your insecurities, but what it will do is it'll give you the tools on how to deal with it when it happens. So I believe you had said it was Todd, the itty bitty shitty committee. His tool for overcoming the itty bitty shitty committee, from what I understood, was gratitude. So I'm going to give you a tool today to overcome when those insecurities happen, because it is horrifying to drive downtown right now and see the buildings boarded up. It is horrifying to see a lot of our friends go out of business. I know people personally who they had to shut their business down. They don't know what they're going to do. And then I've seen friends who've lost their business, got a job, and hate their new job. Suicide's going to be at an all-time high. That's the negative. We know this. We're aware of this. Some of the people protesting, they're not protesting necessarily to open back up the economy, but they're saying domestic violence, suicide rates, mental health rates are going through the roof and causing more deaths, or could be a cumulative cause of deaths more so than COVID. Right or wrong, these are real issues that we are facing together. So here's what we want to start with. I'm so excited that so many of you are entrepreneurs. It's very helpful to see these chats come in. So what I want to do is I want to first explain to you how you actually create a thought. Because we all know instinctually we have thoughts. And we all know instinctually that we can choose our thoughts the way we choose clothes out of our closet. But how do we do that? That becomes the question. So I want to start off, picture my face looking this way throughout the example, right? So a side profile face. At any given moment, we are experiencing roughly 2 million bits of information per second. What is a bit? And this is where it gets wordy. So if you don't get this, we'll go goat yoga in a minute. 2 million bits of information per second. And we are filtering these bits through our 5 senses. So a good acronym for you to remember on your 5 senses is VAKOG. V-A-K-O-G, VAKOG. VAKOG stands for visual, which is what you see, auditory, which is what you hear, and the itty bitty shitty community, that's the thing that you're telling yourself. K is kinesthetic, what we feel. I feel my phone in my hand, I feel the Starbucks cup, or feel as in the emotions that we feel. Olfactory is what we smell, and gustatory is what we taste. If that's tricky, just remember the goat yoga version's gastropubs, right? We eat at gastropubs, gustatory. It sounds similar enough that you can make it work. So VAKOG. So any given moment, we're experiencing 2 million bits of information per second, sorted through our 5 senses. We all have a couple of predominant senses that we tend to work with. So if somebody's talking to you and they say, I see what you're saying, probably a guess that one of their stronger senses is visual, because you can't technically see what somebody's saying, but that's how they interpret and internalize the world. Now, going from your senses, in addition to the 2 million bits of information per second, you also have roughly 30,000 to 70,000 thoughts per day. Now, psychologists, researchers, They debate that number. I've seen it, nope, there's absolutely no more than 50,000 thoughts. And then I've seen other people say 70,000. So you can rest assured that in your brain, you're experiencing 30,000 to 70,000 thoughts per day. Now, so you've got your thoughts, you've got 2 million bits of information per second. They're being filtered through your VACOG, your visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory, knowing that you have a primary pattern. So think of the record grooves, right? How many of you guys remember records? And for those of you curious, I'm 32, so I know what a record is. Thank you. So the deeper neurons that wire together fire together, right? So the deeper you start to run a pattern, the deeper the grooves in that record go. And what happens is you tend to sort this information. There's a pencil-like structure in the back of your skull, above your spinal cord, that's called your RAS, your reticular activation system. This is the part of the brain that when you experience buying a new car, you see that car everywhere on the freeway. So the goal anytime you're in a stuck state, and a stuck state is anything frustration, anger, sadness, self-doubt, insecurities, the goal of a stuck state, when you push, the other state is pushing and you can't move. The goal is to get out of that stuck state and into something that can create positivity or change or a thought that serves you. Don't worry if you're a little lost right now, it'll make sense as we go through. So you've got 2 million bits of information per second, roughly 30,000 to 70,000 thoughts coming at you that you're sorting through your visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, or gustatory. There's 3 ways in which you sort these thoughts. You do 3 things. You distort, you generalize, or you delete the information. Great question. So what is a distortion? A distortion is when you have a conversation with a friend and then you call that friend back up weeks later and you re-talk about that conversation and they're like, that's not at all what we talked about. Or when a couple goes to dinner, cooks dinner at home, and the wife says something and the husband's like, I don't understand what you're saying. That's not how I see it at all. That's a distortion. A generalization is saying, my husband always gets what I say wrong. He's always running late. Anytime you hear an always, that's generally a generalization. The word never can be categorized as a generalization. She never listens to me. She never does what I need her to do. There's no such thing as a never. There's just a never in that moment. And then the third part, you've got the distortion, the generalization, and then the deletion. A deletion is when you completely forget entirely that something happened. You just, because your brain can only hold 7 plus minus 2 bits of information per second. 7 plus minus 2 bits of information per second. So if I've got 2 million bits of information coming at me, my brain has to distort, generalize, or delete all of that information to only get me to that point where I can say, oh, this is what I can do with that thought. Make sure you guys are letting me know if you're understanding this, because I've done this in many corporate workshops and it gets a little tricky at this point. But just know that after you distort, generalize, and delete that information, now you've got roughly 5 plus minus 2 bits of information to actually hold on. So once you can hold on to that information, now you can do something with it. That information over time becomes the grooves in your record. This affects things like your religious views, your political views, your views on should we quarantine or not quarantine, your views on family structure. We call these your meta programs. A meta program is essentially the way in which you see the world consistently. So if you're a Republican, you tend to listen to Republican information. You tend to go towards the route of whatever Republicans are saying, Republican news media outlets. It's activating your reticular activation system multiple times over and over and over. The neurons that are wiring together are firing together, and you become more solidified in your beliefs. And then when somebody comes at you with a different belief, if you're not open to changing why it is you think the way it is, or it doesn't serve you, that's why some people, even when you argue with them logically, they can't move. The neurons that wired together fired together, and that groove on the record got so deep that you can't break it. We always, we tend to talk about parenting, because parenting views on how to raise a child become solidified. And then you know what's worked and what hasn't worked for your children. And so you become very rigid in your thinking, which is also, by the way, this rigidity is also a stuck state. And it's not that there's a good nor bad. I don't want you to think of this as a dichotomy where this side's good, this side's bad, this side's right, this side's wrong. I want you to think of it as ecological. Does this side and this side serve you in one way or another? And when it typically doesn't, that's where our irrational insecurities come from. So I'm going to recap, and then we're going to keep going, and then we're going to get into the irrational insecurities part. So you've got 2 million bits of information per second. Your brain is coming in, it's distorting, generalizing, or deleting this information so it can have approximately 5 plus minus 2 bits of information per second. And a bit could be as simple as the way the Starbucks can feels, the way I hear myself right now, what I'm seeing, Deb looking into the camera, because it froze on her face. So it's all these things that I'm seeing, trying to read the chat, and then I'm categorizing these thoughts. So then what happens is it comes up here. Remember, side profile, here's the thoughts coming in, comes up here. And now there's a difference between your unconscious and your conscious. For the goat yoga version of this, because we can get very deep, for the goat yoga version, all you have to know is most times when you have a reaction, it's unconscious. For the most part, just know it's unconscious. And what you do is you create what's called an internal representation. Wow, what the heck is an internal representation, you may ask? Great question. An internal representation, a way to think of it is like a label. So I know, if we're using brand loyalty, Starbucks, for me, I have an internal representation of what this brand means to me. It's calming, it's relaxing, it makes me feel like I can conquer anything. It's a comfort for me, like mashed potatoes, right? We all have foods that are very comforting. Growing up inside of hospitals, people always ask you, hey, what can I bring you? What can I do for you? And my response was always Starbucks. I am a cult fanatic of Starbucks. I've created an internal representation, a label, that if I'm about to do a webinar or a speaking event or do corporate trainings, I know for a fact I get a Starbucks because it gives me that sense of peace and control in my life. We all have things like this. It's where you become irrationally loyal to a brand. Another one is Lululemon's. I don't care it's $128 per sweatpants. I will wear those every day if I need to. And so that's what it happens, because the internal representation, the label of the sweatpants means comfort, classy, sophisticated, brand aware, like I love their labeling. And so as you think of your brands, I want you to think, what is the internal representation or the label people put on your brand that they must have access to? Because here's where it gets good. It's not necessarily that you're creating a label, right? Wells Fargo is known as, they've had, and Deb can jump in and help me with this, but they work on history. We have a history of being a bank, right? Whatever that thing is, their heritage. It's a heritage brand. That's the word I was looking for.
Heritage brand, nostalgia brand. Right now, they're a little bit of a shit show if anybody has tried to apply for a PPP loan from them, right?
Totally. Yeah. And that shit show is their internal representation or label in which we all associate. We know right now, yeah, they were a heritage brand, but they're not our brand today. I know so many people have been burned by them, and so do you. And so that becomes our internal representation, which activates our RAS. So every time we hear the brand Wells Fargo, if our internal representation is that strong against Wells Fargo, every time we hear them, we get a little unrest inside of us. So from the internal representation, because that's the part we got to pay attention to as we get into the irrational insecurities and learn how to leverage this against us. So as we start thinking about the internal representation, a couple things happen. It does a quick state change. When I say internal representation, or when I say Wells Fargo, or when I say Starbucks, or when I say cute puppies, how many of you on an unconscious level, meaning you're not initially aware of it unless I ask you, how many of you have a feeling associated with said brand, associated with said moment? All of us, right? If I go, how many of you just had a state change? You have some kind of an interpretation about a puppy that changes your state. Same thing with little babies, right? When most of us see a baby, we want to like squeeze their thighs and be like, ah, like there's something about us inside that wants to bite them because it's just so cute, right? Let me know if somebody goes, ew. Apple products, great idea. I have a Mac. I love my Apple. I'm a diehard fanatic of Apple. I have an internal representation of Apple. And so from there, it changes my state. And my state is the mood in which that label represents. So when I say a cute puppy, it changes my state from just walking down the street to like, oh, I have to have it. We all have situations like this. Oakley, great example. When I think of Oakley, I want to go out and hiking. Like I want to be outdoors. I definitely don't want to be inside, and it's a comfort. It's a sturdy brand. It's comfort. So it changes my physiology, it changes my state into immediately, I wasn't thinking of the sunglasses. I was thinking of hiking in Yosemite when you said Oakley. Like that's an immediate change for me. And my mind, while I'm even talking to you, my mind went off on this whole tangent about like, oh, I want to go to Yosemite. Like it's not even about Yosemite right now, but that's how quick it can happen. From there, it changes your physiology. So when we hold up cute puppies and we go, oh, my physiology just completely changed. You can see the wrinkles in my forehead, my eyes softened, the corners of my mouth went up, I started to smile. As far as kinesthetic, I felt warmth in my heart again. All of these things happen in a sheer moment. Over time, when we were talking about Wells Fargo, how many of you, if you're having some experiences with the PPP or getting your loans and you hate them, how many of you felt your blood start to rush a little quicker? How many of you felt a certain amount of unrest or frustration or anger? I remember United, when we had United, they jumped the guy off the plane. How many of us, when we go to book a United flight, we immediately start to be like, I know they're not going to take care of us, but we got to get on this trip. Or it's the cheapest airline, let's just go with it right now. But we don't want to be part of that, because what happened is the situation became so severe that it changed our internal representation or our label about what we thought of said product. And then it changes our state, either happy, bad, that's usually an emotion. A state is an emotion. And then it changes our physiology, which is our body and how we deal with it. When the itty bitty shitty committee says, focus on gratitude, it's a brilliant strategy, because whatever your stuck state is, gratitude changes the way your state has behaved and it gets you unstuck. You can't be really angry at Wells Fargo and be thinking about gratitude. They're just totally contradicting emotions that when you put the energy into gratitude, you feel less. Thanks, Amazon. You feel less upset because you're thinking about what you are grateful for, and it changes the state. So you put the internal representation on something and label that internal representation, label it to whatever that emotion is that serves you. And that emotion will change the physiology, and the over time, the physiology becomes the behavior and then the habits. So unfortunately or fortunately, during quarantine, a lot of people right now, they're consuming alcohol at unprecedented rates. That's how they're dealing with the internal representation of what quarantine means. And then they're taking that internal representation, they're seeing something about, let's just use wine for an example. They're seeing wine, and the wine has a feeling to them, whether that's relaxation or comfort or an excuse to let loose or take that sigh of relief after a hard day or at noon, whatever that thing is. And then what happens is they change the physiology. Now, if you don't change your physiology in enough time, it becomes your behaviors, and then you get the negative repercussions. So when they say anything along the lines of everything in moderation, that's because they're trying to change the behaviors and the habits and the patterns that come. So I'm going to give a real quick overview, and then we're going to get into the insecurities portion. But I wanted you to understand how it is our thoughts come at us, how we filter the thoughts that serve us, because doesn't everything serve us? And some of us are like, no, I volunteer for other people. Yeah, but you get something out of volunteering. You get the feelings of peace, you get the feelings of joy, you get the feelings of helping somebody else, you may get networking opportunities. So all of these things we are categorizing based on how it serves us. And again, there's no good or bad, there's no right or wrong. It's not a dichotomy situation. It's a resourcefulness situation. So definitely eating more. I'm checking out the comments. So eating, there's probably a favorite food. Patty, let me know what that favorite food is. I'd be curious, because for me, it's been meat. I don't typically eat a lot of meat. Like I want burgers every freaking night, which my fiance loves. But I've never been like, I crave a burger. But now I don't know what it is. But yeah, so eating more is definitely a great example. Thank you for that. Halo Top ice cream, don't get me started on that. That's some good stuff right there. And when we even think of Halo Top, how many of you, as I say, Halo Top ice cream, you had an image come to your mind? You know, and I'm guessing if you really think about what that image is, that image was really close to your face. It was probably a bright image. It wasn't a dim image. It was probably a really bright image. Might have been turning slightly. Maybe you see the lid coming off of it. It may be moving just slightly around, like on a pedestal, right? It's not pedestal. That's not the word I'm thinking of. But nonetheless, they have a very strong image and an internal representation. For me, the internal representation on Halo Top is amazing goodness. And you just saw it. That was unconscious. I thought of amazing goodness and ice cream, and look at how happy I am right now. I had an entire state change. So if you want to have fun with branding or with your company or where your state changes, go look in the mirror. Not now, obviously, you got to finish this webinar. Go look in the mirror and just say certain names of brands and notice when you light up and when your face softens or when you get angry. Mess with your emotions a little bit. It's one thing to feel emotions. It's another one to strategically mess with them. So you've got your 2 minute recap, and then we're going to get into the irrational insecurities, because once you figure this out, your entire life can look different. This, everybody, is the difference from how I lived in hospitals for sometimes, I think it was 2016, 180 days that year I spent inside of hospitals. And that wasn't just like fun, you know what I mean? Like, it's 180 days. And as I figured this stuff out, I started to leverage it. And I didn't even talk about this when I built my business, right? Like I kept it quiet because I needed to test it. And it's the difference of how you go 180 days a year in the hospital to how you travel all over speaking when quarantine opens up, or how you live a life that you're passionate about and purposeful about. A life that gives you your wildest dreams and allows you to leverage the bad stuff and turn it into stuff that serves you. And I want to make a real quick comment on what's going on with COVID, because the thing is many of us think it's bad. And I'm very careful on how I tread this next statement. COVID, although it's a worldwide pandemic, and there's a lot of bad to it, it is not a universally bad problem. Because don't we know a lot of people who are taking this and using it as an opportunity? So if you have thoughts right now or fears right now about what is happening, recognize that it is happening to you, but not for you. So as I said that right now, some of you, the thing about COVID is it doesn't change who you are as a human being, but it lights your baggage up. Whatever you have extreme baggage on right now, it's being lit up. Whatever your doubts or your insecurities or fears are, it's lighting it up. Let me give an example. There are a lot of parents struggling right now with how they feel about their ability to homeschool or their ability to be a parent. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in this group. I just saw Jim Hernandez join. He's a fantastic business owner. He owns a sales training company. Brilliant man. He was actually a man that gave me my start years ago. I'm completely indebted to him and grateful for everything he's done for me. And fortunately or fortunately, I'm watching a lot of people who've done a lot of good for this world lose everything. And to Deb's point earlier, we started this webinar off with her personal share about how when she drove down Austin 6th Avenue and she saw the windows boarded up and the businesses going under, she thought, am I worthy of being an entrepreneur? Am I great at this? And I'm putting a little bit of words in her mouth. So don't quote me 100% on that. But there's this thing that we go through where when we see somebody else fail, we wonder if we're next. Especially when it's, what was that? 70% of businesses are out of business in 5 years, some statistic like that. And so what happens during COVID is our baggage gets laid up. If we don't think we're a good enough entrepreneur before COVID, our baggage is going to come out way more after it. If we don't think we're smart enough to run a business, if we don't think we have enough resources, resourcefulness, whether that's time, money, any of the enoughs syndrome, I'm not good enough, smart enough, wealthy enough, educated enough, networked enough, whatever your enough statement was before COVID, it's being lit up right now. So if there's anybody who can share some of the things that maybe they've seen where your baggage is getting lit up. That's part of the choose your own adventure. I'll work with that through the rest of this. Deb, did you have something to add? Oh, I can't hear you though.
Okay, sorry. Hold on. I've started like having myself permanently on mute and having my video off when I join Zoom calls because of the story that I told you earlier, where I jumped into somebody's family Lego building call and they thought I was like a weird female pedophile coming to Zoom bomb their kids. So anyway, I'll say, like, talk about like lighting up your shit. I feel like I do a really good job of playing a role in life. And before this, I was playing the role of the business leader and entrepreneur that like I had it all together, right? And then this comes, and actually I had a conversation with my coach via text message earlier this morning about this, where I've imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is one thing that has gotten really lit up for me, because when I see all of these other organizations like making these shifts and making these fast, like they're quickly reimagining their business, or they're making the pivot, or whatever. I mean, I feel like I was really quick to do that myself, but I keep questioning, is it enough? Am I worthy? Every time I come out here in front of a group of people, I mean, and this has been like my entire career as an author and a speaker too, it's like, who's going to see under the covers and see what I really have to provide, which maybe is not enough. Right? So that's one thing that got lit up. Let me tell you the other thing that really got lit up for me. And this is a complicated one, and I'd be interested in your spin on this, because I also asked Todd about this one. And this is survivor guilt. Survivor guilt, like just this it's a really, really difficult feeling, especially in organizations where people are leaving those organizations. I have other entrepreneurial colleagues who have not received any financial aid at this point, and they're either closing their doors, or they're gratefully or they're greatly like downscaling their businesses. Or I see this a lot with like a lot of the nonprofit organizations that I'm involved with. Some have money, some have been funded, some haven't. Today is Giving Tuesday. Who needs the money more? What if this one makes it and doesn't make, like, imposter syndrome, I have to say, is like one of the more like troubling things. But those are two things that got lit up in me. Those were things that I had from before that I thought I had done a really good job of. And I say good job because I know it's not necessarily the best tactic, but I at least was successful for myself in marginalizing those things or compartmentalizing them so I didn't have to deal with them. All of a sudden, here they are, and they're 100 times more intense than they've ever been, right?
Yeah. So as we transition from the mindset mapping and into the irrational insecurities, I want to start off by saying we're all hopelessly and desperately insecure. I don't want to, I want you to know, guys, like, I put my life out there and my extreme vulnerability at the very least. So if you're not ready to deal with your demons, you can at least make fun of mine. That became my coping mechanism. I'm afraid that nobody will like me, so I speak on stages hoping to make friends. Like that's what it is, right? And I figured, if I don't know how to network with people because I'm so insecure at every event I go to, the only way I can make the friends is to be on stage, because I'm too insecure to start the conversation over lunch. So imposter syndrome and survivor's guilt and our insecurities, they are coming down to two main reasons why we're all afraid. These are the primal fears that all of us have. From the two primal fears, I would then go ahead and I will explain the three reasons behind the primal fears. And then I'll explain the antidote. So I wanted to set that context for what's about to happen, because if you thought it was nerdy before, it's going to get way more interesting for you now, especially because we've got some good examples. So thank you, first of all, for sharing that, Deb, because it's not easy to get on a webinar with your esteemed colleagues and peers and the people that you're building brands with and admit, hey, this is my shit that's being lit up. So the two core fears that we all have, every single one of us on this webinar, and if we don't have it, cool story, bro, sit with it. First one is fear of not being loved. Loved can also be acceptance. If you're like, no, I'm loved by everybody I need to be loved by in this moment, well, do you feel like you're accepted by everybody? And then the second one is the fear of not being loved, and then the fear of not being enough. And so in a way that comes into the acceptance again. So at the core of who we are all, because like our brains, we're searching, caveman days, we're searching to go out and to secure the resources to survive. Well, sure, it's not necessarily as difficult to secure the resources to survive anymore, but we still feel that our unique abilities and skills and conversations and what we bring to the world is never going to be enough. And then we won't be accepted. So fear of not being enough or fear of not being loved. Now, when we hear things like, again, choose your own adventure. So luckily, I'll pick on you, Deb. When you go through a feeling, yes, that was my foot. I had to readjust. Awkward. When you go through a feeling of imposter syndrome, which one got lit up for you more as you learned this? Was it fear of not being loved or accepted, or fear of not being enough?
I think for me, fear of not being enough. Yeah, fear of not being enough, because questioning my business savvy, my entrepreneurial ability, my ability to make the right decisions with or without funding, how much runway to give myself. Can I work hard enough? I mean, we are still bringing in new clients and doing business, albeit in a, at a different rate and in a different pattern, but never feeling like I could catch up. If I could describe it, if I could describe the words, they are, the 2 steps forward and then 2 steps back. So that's what gives me the feeling of not being enough. I feel like I'm enough when I'm growing the business, when I'm growing employees, when I'm growing myself, when I'm that kind of stuff. And so being in the same place all the time right now feels like not enough.
Absolutely. And you're not alone. And again, great. Thank you for the self-awareness. So there's 3 reasons why you feel like that. So here's your framework, guys, for those of you who need this step-by-step, because I know I'm a step-by-step girl. Like if I don't get the tools and tactics and like, okay, what do I do with this? And we're not here to just talk about our feelings. We're here to actually do something with them and create that state, that internal representation that changes things for us and gets us out of stuck. So first step, I need you to identify when you're going through the frustration, does it root in fear of not being loved or accepted, or fear of not being enough? Which one is it for you? From there, the 3 reasons why, and what causes all fears is the fear of less, the fear of loss, and the fear of never. As I said this, some of you probably had a gut reaction right here, right in your chest, and in your upper stomach, and something triggered for you. By the way, you have baggage or a trigger if somebody says something and you have an irrational response. There was an example we're going to get. Yep, I'll repeat all 3. So it's fear of less, fear of loss, and fear of never. So let me explain the irrational response, because I want you all to get this. How many of you love Trump? Right? Some of you, and Trump's great for this example because he's polarizing. If you had an irrational response to the word Trump right now, there's baggage there. If I said, let's say I'm talking to you about, homeschooling your children. And I say, that's the reason you don't feel you're adequate as a parent. If you had an irrational response to somebody without kids telling you how inadequate you're being as a parent homeschooling, you might have baggage there. And it's baggage because it doesn't necessarily affect you if anybody said it. So there was an example, we were in Hawaii, and I do hula dancing for fun. That's another side story. And so part of hula dancing is you go back to the basics, you go back to the foundation, and you have to paint a skirt, okay? And you have to paint a skirt with the elements of nature. It gets really, I know if you're thinking this is weird, I thought it was weird too. And I'm painting a skirt and this roach comes out from under the skirt. Like my brush went over its back and I was like, like it's a roach. And I lost my shit, y'all. And then I moved my skirt and it's a 30-foot long skirt. I'm not even exaggerating. I have it in my closet if you need me to show you this. And so I moved my skirt to another part. Yeah, I'll show you photos. I don't care. And I moved the skirt to another part of the lawn and another roach came out and I lost it. It's just a bug. I'm crying. There's all these other hula dancers painting their skirts without having emotional breakdowns. I was the one who had an emotional breakdown. And somebody came up to me and said, Kaylin, what does this roach represent? And this was at the start of COVID. And first of all, I was not ready to be coached in that moment. Irrational moment, not ready to be coached. And I go, well, it's disorganized. I wasn't expecting it. It came out of nowhere. It represents lung issues and hospitalizations, and they're so dirty, and I hate them. And you can hear it in my voice. Like I just lost it. But see, that roach represented COVID to me in that moment. Because we had just gotten to Hawaii. The event was about to get canceled. What do roaches represent? Disorganized, no control, scattered, respiratory issues. They're dirty. All of these fears for COVID came out when I saw that roach. That was irrational baggage, y'all. And it stems from the three things: less, loss, or never. Less. COVID to me means I will have less of a quality of life than I would have without this pandemic. Loss. I will lose friends to this disease. I will also lose connections of people, businesses are experiencing unprecedented loss. And never, things will never be the same. All three of those combined created irrational baggage. And I happened to label that internal representation, that baggage, on this roach. And I knew it was my shit getting lit up because everybody else was painting their hula skirts. Didn't have any issues with the roaches. And if they saw a roach, they're like, oh, nature. I couldn't handle it. So when I said less, loss, or never, how many of you felt something light up in one of those three categories? Which one was it for you, Deb?
I think it was loss. Definitely loss. You know, loss of income, loss of status, loss of you know, my own self-confidence, loss of identity, those kinds of things. Like loss has been my big feeling. Lionel put in there, loss of freedom. Yeah. That kind of stuff. I think less got really lit up in me as well. So like you, Kaylin, I make most of my money as a professional speaker.
Yeah.
Not from my company. Like most of what I do is just from traveling all over the world. And if I'm not able to do that important part of my career and share my information, I feel less.
Yeah.
Like I'm not fulfilling my full potential. And I don't have any, it's interesting because loss and less both really lit up for me, not never. And that might be because I do have a daily gratitude practice, and I have been able to really key into opportunity for reimagining my business, my career, my relationships, all that kind of stuff. But loss and less, like really triggering for me.
Yeah. And those are the two biggest triggers, by the way. Never tends to happen. I don't see it much with entrepreneurs, but career-driven, ambitious professionals, theirs is never, because they think that they'll never climb the corporate ladder. They'll never have the opportunities. They don't think necessarily in the same ways as entrepreneurs. I do a lot of corporate trainings for Vistage Network and those companies. And it's interesting. So they have certain groups of CEO groups and then the employee groups, right? The second in command. And every time I talk about this, they get the nevers, but then the entrepreneurial types get the loss or less. So the question then becomes, what do we do with this? Because it's one thing to talk about our pain. It's another thing to wear our pain like a trophy and not use it for a catalyst for change. And so we're going to get into how we can change that, because the last thing I want is all of you are being, by the way, for those of you sharing, loss of fun, Todd. Yeah. Loss of connection, loss of fun, loss of what it means to get a hug again. That was
never my thing, that,
no,
right?
That's not Deb's. I tried to side tangent. When she came to San Diego, I tried to give her a hug and she was like, she eventually caved in. But it was a
I, you
very
know, I might give you a strong elbow bump or something like that. I've never been a big hugger, but, one of the things that's interesting, and I'm curious if you're going to get to this, I think about, Hannah, right?
Yeah.
And so Hannah's my daughter. Her college graduation is supposed to be this Saturday, and it's the graduation that never was or never will be, right? So there's a lot of, as I've been talking to her over the past couple of weeks, and this, other parents may relate to this, whether it's a high school senior or it's a college senior or even, an eighth grader getting ready to go to high school. But or just missing school altogether, kids missing school. There's a lot of loss, less, never happening there. One of the things that I struggle with as a parent, besides like the ongoing fear of how am I going to screw up this kid's life today, which has been going on literally every minute for the last 22 years. Talk about imposter syndrome, right? Talking her through the fact that she's not having a college graduation. She sent me a text message last week that was a photograph of her holding her diploma, which she had received in the mail, in an envelope full of confetti. And the only reaction she had was that she was effing pissed over the fact that, her 16 years of schooling had been minimized to an envelope full of confetti that she herself had to clean up, right? And so one of the things that I'm acutely aware of as a parent is I can't make her feel the feels. I also can't give her the words. Do you have any experience that you can share to help people who are maybe dealing with people who are close to us, loved ones, who are also dealing with these things? Because like if I trace her loss, less, never back to, not being enough or not being loved, there's probably combinations of all of that shit everywhere. Do you have anything that you can share with folks to help with that, aside from having her just like watch the replay of this session?
Which you can do.
Of
Yeah,
course.
so here's where it gets fun. Okay. First, in order to do this, I got to tell a story. Okay. Because at the very least, some people on this, and maybe you won't get anything out of this webinar, but some people will get the stories. I always say it's no coincidence that you're here. And it's no coincidence that of all the things you could be doing right now, you found this webinar and you logged on and you're still here. So this is the stuff you need to know. Okay. Story goes, and this is a true story, it's from an entrepreneur friend of ours. You know him. He's a very faith-based man. And he was, and I never do this story justice, so work with me on the big picture here. He was driving his car around a bend in a road, and the car actually went off the road, and it fell a certain amount, and he was trapped inside the car. And it was a near-death experience for him. And he stood, or sat, I guess, in that car for hours hoping to be rescued, not knowing if he was ever going to be rescued. And in his time of absolute grief, he felt like nobody was there for him. He felt like nobody would ever find him again. He felt that that was how he was going to die, was alone in a ravine after a car accident, and it might be weeks before somebody noticed. And that's heartbreaking. And when he thinks about that accident, he remembers being completely alone. Now, he was so wired, his reticular activation system, of being completely alone, that a faith-based man failed to recognize that there was this bus that pulled up next to the ravine. They had seen the tire tracks, and they pulled up, and it was a bunch of Christian kids on this bus. And they noticed him down there. They were the ones who called the authorities to find him, and they all stood on the side of the road praying for him. So in the moment of his absolute darkest, in the moment where he did not know there would be any solution for him, he now had to go back and realize that that was probably the most loving moment of his life, was to notice that a faith-based man, a bus full of children, were praying for him. He thought he was alone in that memory. The reality is he was never more connected. So the question becomes, what do we do in situations like Hannah? How do we make sure that she feels what she needs to feel? So the antidote to the less loss or never, is the opposite. Same thing. Gratitude gets you out of a stuck state. What's the opposite of less?
More.
What's the opposite of never?
Always.
What's the opposite? Loss.
Gain.
Gain. So when somebody's really stuck, and they have to be open to it. Now, mind you, there's a difference. What she's going through is called being human. No amount of personal growth work can get you past being human. If a friend dies in the hospital room next to me of cystic fibrosis, I will allow myself the time to cope. That's called being human. You can't personal growth yourself out of some of your darkest days. You can allow yourself the grace of being human. My mom used to set an alert, a timer. You know, there was a time when I was missing prom because I was in the hospital. And actually, I've missed all my proms. I've also missed all my homecomings. I've missed a lot of key moments in my life because I was in an isolation ward in a hospital. And my mom, every time I was down on it, she'd set a timer for 30 minutes. Be human for 30 minutes. And then when it's over, we got to find a different story. We got to find a different solution. We got to see what's behind the veil. And for me, that really worked. So when we talk about last, lost, or never, I want us to now shift out of feeling last, lost, and never and shift into the opposite emotions. And by the way, if your baggage is lit up right now on something, may not be the time. Relax, go through the motions of being human, and then find your another story. Find your different internal representation, the label of which your senses are sorting and your reticular activation system is going. So in a feeling of imposter syndrome, you said it was less for you or loss? Remind me.
It was less.
Less. So when you're experiencing moments of less, find where there's moments of more. So when you've got a really bad, I'm not worthy enough, there's, you know, a less income, less notoriety, less speaking opportunities that pay, because you know what I mean? Like, I get it, girl. I'm there with you. 98%
Yep.
of my revenue wiped out. So when you've got a feeling of less, you think, you know what? It's more time, and yours going to be different than mine, but it's more time to connect with a different audience. It's more time to focus on the branding side. It's more time to come to terms with what I'm amazing at and how I can use my unique gifts and talents to get out there in the world. It's more time to lift my daughter up and be there for her. It's more time to appreciate the little moments that maybe we've neglected. And then you focus your to-do list on the more. So you focus your to-do list on the opposite of the less, loss, or never that you're feeling in that moment. Same way gratitude shifts you out of a stuck state, the more gain and always shifts you out of the deeper primal fears. Because it's not about ending it.
Yeah, the thing that I did wrong with my daughter was, you know, when her reaction was, you know, middle fingers to the university, right? And she said, well, this is a big crock of shit. And this is what I get as the recognition of my 16 years of schooling. I could have been a little bit more like your mom to say, like, take some time to feel the feels, but, you know, set a timer for it and then let's talk about it. Instead, I jumped right in, trying to coach her, trying to mentor her, trying to personal growth her to death by saying, well, don't let that take away or minimize the achievement that it really is. And she said this to me, right? So I like, that's a big takeaway, is to let people feel the feels. So one of the things that I am incredibly self-aware of, I've become keenly self-aware of, is that I'm really good at reporting on my feelings. I'm not very good at actually having the feelings. I have a way of projecting that on other people. So I hope that everybody else who's listening here is like taking away some of these things, how to replace, you know, the less, loss, and never with the opposite things. Like, you know, very, very small thing for me, Kaylin, is that over the past, I guess I'm going on week 8 of being at home. I think I'm on week 8 or whatever. It has given me more time to focus on things that I like to do outside. Right. And so I have a daily commitment with Eric. We go hiking. We have a beautiful, incredible green belt near us. And we do that every single day that we can. As long as the weather is cooperating, we go do that. And, you know, a really, really fun thing happened yesterday that probably wouldn't have much impact on me in any other situation. But in this system of trails, there's this legend of this abandoned VW bus and then this trail that's called the Switchback Party, right? And we've logged well over 100 miles in this green belt over the past couple of weeks, and we have never seen either one of those things. Yesterday, we stumbled across both of them, and it's like it's a very, very small thing, but it was incredibly joyful for me. And it was something that I thought about all the way home. Like, I was like, oh, I took these really cool pictures of the bus. I'm going to post them on my social media. This is something that I want to share with other people, that, you know, we found this like hidden mysterious thing in the woods, and we were looking for one of them and we found both of them, whatever. And I will say that this technique that you're talking about of, you know, replacing the feeling with something positive, I have seen evidence. It doesn't have to be something massive, right? It doesn't have to be something really, really super meaningful. For me, it was the simplicity in finding the abandoned VW bus, right?
Yeah.
And I will say, like, I previously have been a skeptic about a lot of this stuff about, like, take the negative feelings and, you know, replace them with this, and some of this mindset work. I previously in my adult life, I mean, not in the I would say, like, probably not in the last 15 years, but before that, I would have said that the path to success was paved just with hard work and diligence and smarts and strategy and grit. But I have come to learn that working on the things inside of us, it is like, that's the first step for everything. So anyway, like, I want to thank you for this, for this gift and for those tactics. And then why I'm sharing this with everybody else is just to say, like, this very simple experience that I share, like, it's a small thing. It's a tiny thing, but it actually, like, it produced endorphins for me. It made me smile a little bit in my heart. It gave me a sense of pride. It captured my imagination in incredible ways. It gave me something else to think about, like, how long has it been here? When did it get there? How did it fall down this giant mountain? Why is it still here? Right? All of that kind of stuff. So I have had positive impact from what Klyn is talking about here.
Yeah. And I want to make a couple quick distinctions too. It doesn't have to be complicated. Yeah, that's true. The simplicity is where it's at, but all we're trying to do is I'm trying to change your internal representation, your label, from a stuck state into one that empowers you to move forward. And there's an interesting, we talked earlier about dichotomies, good and bad, right or wrong, positive or negative. I want to be very clear. How many of you listening, and if there's a lot of alpha types, I speak a lot on the East Coast, negative sometimes fuels us. How many of us have that experience when we were younger where they said, you'll never be, insert what you wanted to be. And you were like, I'll show you. So it's not even about being positive or negative. And we can't simply say, you know, well, if she's just positive and she thinks of everything that's gone right her senior year and all the amazing qualities, we don't know that positivity fuels her to make the decisions she needs to make. The only goal we have is getting her out of a stuck state of frustration and into one that serves her. So if you're experiencing something that it's a thought that does not serve you, that's where the more gain and always can come into effect, because it's not that it's going to eradicate the problem entirely. It's just going to give you a thought that serves you enough into momentum.
Oh, I could never know what serves her, right? You know, also the right response was not to say, well, mommy loves you, right? Which is, you know, which was another reaction too. So this is really, really helpful. I want to be mindful of time. It's 10 after. So I know I've taken up a lot of this. I just want to do a little time check for you. So you know where you are in your timing.
Yeah. I mean, we did it. Like, this is the part where we go into questions, Q&A, examples. You know, knowing that we got about 15 minutes left, you know, we can, sometimes people, if this is lighting something up for you, by all means share. But I mean, that's where the beauty is it's the dichotomy and that internal representation. When we have things like imposter syndrome or survivor's guilt, sometimes, and here's the most important thing, sometimes when you have that, you don't have to do anything with it. You just have to recognize it and then shift into a state that serves you. The reason gratitude works is the internal representation. When I say the word gratitude, to your point, it releases happy-go-lucky vibes, right? It releases the endorphins. It increases a lot of the neurotransmitters and the chemicals. And gratitude shifts you from a state of frustration, anger, angst, anxiety, sadness, into a state of like, I can do something with this. That's all you got to do. If you want, remember I said the goat yoga version, if you want to shift out of any state that is not serving you, focus on the opposite of that state. Curiosity, huge one. So if I were, if I was in this situation, I don't even pretend to be, because I don't know what she's going through, but you can say, looking back, what were some of the things that COVID's taught you? And she might not be receptive at that moment. But I guarantee you, she's probably gotten to talk to a lot of friends that she wouldn't have gotten to talk to on that day of graduation.
Yep, absolutely.
I had a Zoom birthday party with 99 people. When was the last time you had 99 people at a birthday party?
Yeah, never.
I never have. It was an amazing moment. And so there's amazing moments if we are open to looking for them, and we can use our thoughts as fuel, positive or negative.
Yeah, I like this idea of curiosity, and that's something that Todd Palmer talked about when we talked about the itty bitty shitty committee. The curiosity is always for me like a great emotion to tap into, because it actually lights up my brain in a lot of really positive ways. Because when I'm curious, then I shift into a mode of abundance. I become open. I question things, not in an accusatory way, but more in a, I wonder why that is. That's it. It just, I don't know. It just sort of like, I imagine my brain just completely opens up when I shift into a mode of curiosity. And so much of what I do for a living is all about curiosity and like shining a light into the dark areas and things like that. But that's been interesting. That's probably why like my imagination was so lit up yesterday when I found the Volkswagen bus, right? All those questions, that curiosity, that's a fun feeling for me to follow, right? Yeah. And that's why I've helped, I've helped countless organizations through this COVID time. I've helped them come up with ideas to either pivot their businesses and their business models, or pivot their brand, or pivot their marketing, or pivot their customer experience, and become a business that exists in a virtual world. Because that actually, like, it serves me. I'm giving to other people, but that curiosity about their business and my ability to ask those questions and help them ask more questions about their own business, like, that serves me in this incredible way that just makes me feel healthier.
Yeah.
So that's been really interesting.
Todd
is asking in the chat box here about where can he learn more? Where can he get more information?
Yeah, so it's super simple. I give out free master classes all the time on my website. To get access, just text INSPIRE to 66866. And then from there, you're going to get an email every week. It's going to be an inspirational hospital story combined with actual tactics you can use to get through it. And we have, I think, 3 courses right now, absolutely all free, no money. Whether it's insecurities, fears, stuck states, we really get deep into it. And they're all similar to like this webinar where we get really personal. There's a couple master classes where people will be talking about the thing and we dive so deep that they have an emotional response, and you see baggage getting lit up, and then you see the road to recovery on it. This is all stemming from something called Neuro-Linguistic Programming. I'm happy to go ahead and also send you flyers to discounted trainings, the trainings that I went to. I'm associated very strongly with the companies that taught me. And then I advertise a lot of this on the podcast also. So you learn a lot about this from the show. So all of those, basically, you don't need to know anything other than text INSPIRE to 66866. And I respond to all those. But
I used to use that 66866, but I would have people text me the word sex. So don't text sex to 66866 because you'll get something different. Definitely. Hey, are there questions out there from folks? I love it. These sessions have been so great. Like I brag on our Brand New World webinar debinars because we get the highest retention of anybody because people really like these topics and they like to stick around and ask questions and stuff like that. Anybody have any questions for Kaylin? Yes, all of you are fantastic. Oh no,
True.
that's just to me. So Kaylin just typed only to panelists. You are all fantastic. Thank you for this experience and coming together today. So yes, all of you are amazing, and thank you for coming. And thank you to the people who keep coming to these things. We've got some great sessions coming up, but it's unusual that you get to have this this cool time with Kaylin, her undivided attention, because she really does have a lot of stuff going on. So feel free to ask a question here. Make sure that you do text INSPIRE to 66866 so that you can get access to her stuff. You want access to my stuff, it's always at debgabor.com. We have all the stuff up there like Stockdale Paradox exercise, ideal customer exercise. We have some new exercises that are going to be coming out. We have a couple new sessions. We have something on brand culture next week, actually with my culture index rep. So those of you who are leading businesses right now, my company, we use culture index, not just to help us in the hiring and recruiting process, but helping us most effectively lead and manage our teams and setting up our teams for success. So we're going to have him next week. Also, I'm doing something tomorrow with a company called Yonder, which is an AI company. And this is a technology that was developed initially for the US military to go and sniff out sort of terrorist cell communication that was going on online. They've taken the technology, they've commercialized it and made it available to organizations to figure out like where are pockets of influence that are having conversations about your brand and what are the impacts to the brand. This is going to be really, really interesting because they're applying this AI technology to a couple of big brand stories that we've seen emerge over the past couple of weeks. So just to tie this back to what we've been talking about here, one of those things being survivor guilt. And specifically, we're going to be looking at like where were the pockets of conversation taking place online about PPP give back. So those of you who are business owners who have applied for and received or not received PPP money, which I've referenced here a couple of times, the big story a couple of weeks ago were that big businesses like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse chain and Danny Meyer's Union Square Restaurant Group and Shake Shack had received PPP loans. The first to bow to public pressure was Shake Shack. The other, it took Ruth's Chris, I think, probably 72 hours before they even acted. And who knows if they really wanted to give back the money, but they caved to public pressure. One of the things that we're going to analyze is where did that pressure come from and how is it going to affect those brands long term? And we're going to look at it through the eyes of data that was gathered and analyzed via artificial intelligence. So that's tomorrow with Yonder, and information about that's on the Deb Gabor website under the webinar tab. But I'm going to say, like, Kaylin, if you could leave us with like one huge takeaway, meaning like if there's just one thing that people listening to this, if there's only one thing from this entire experience with you that they should take away and do, what would that one thing be?
Only put the energy behind the thoughts that serve you.
Right on. Okay. Sage advice from such a young person, but with so much experience. I know, right? Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So are there any questions? I want to make sure that we don't leave with any unanswered questions. My dad always used to say that the only stupid question is the one that remains unasked. He also used to say common sense isn't all that common, which is something that I'm recognizing more and more of. Hello, Chanel. Good to see you, pretty puppy. Jamie asked a question. All right. Kaylin, how have you helped others understand their loss given your personal situation of many losses?
Yeah, so I tell this story. I tell the story quite frequently of Jake, and Jake was about 6 or 7. I was in my early teenage years, and at the time at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics, we would go downstairs to the gym every day and we'd work out. This was before there was a lot of contact precautions and 6 feet rules. And Jake and I became really good friends. And he would always, he'd come in just so excited to work out. And he'd look up at me and say, one day I'm going to run like you can. And it was treadmills and they faced each other. And I watched Jake slowly deteriorate to the point where one day he was trying to run, then he was on oxygen. And then I got the news that he was on a ventilator. And many of us know what happens when you go on a ventilator. And that was the last I saw Jake. And dealing with friends or people that you love and people that were younger than you, you talk about survivor's guilt. I'm one of the oldest and fittest people with my condition in the world. I've buried more friends than I care to count. And I remember a couple of them when they died, my parents just said they moved. And they never explained what death was to me. It didn't connect. And so as we navigate this, how have I helped people in their situation with many losses? Number one, I never want to put an internal representation on what they're going through because I don't know. How we map our world through our senses is unique to all of us. So it's that old acronym of seek to understand, then to be understood. So I'm never going to guess how Hannah's feeling or how Jake's parents were feeling. Never going to guess that. What I will do though is I will focus on if I've got X amount of years on this planet, which by the way, expired. The median life expectancy, I believe, is 21 right now. If you were born today with my condition, you're going to see 21 years old. I'm 32. So in my time, the way I've coped, and there's no right or wrong for anybody, this is me and my experience. The way I've coped is I've met the goal of how many friends can I make before I die? Because then it's not thinking about the less or the loss, it's thinking about the more and the gain. And so there's a reason right now I'm at 58,000 followers organically, because every day, the only thing I care about is how many friends can I make? How many conversations can I have? What kind of impact can I do? And I just hope, and I believe in my God, I pray that if I focus on the building of the relationships rather than the loss, that the business will come. I don't know. I have no clue if this is going to work. I don't know if someday I'm going to be like, Jim, will you hire me? Like, I don't know. Deb, you got an opening? I don't know. But I know that the more I focus on loving and building, solidifying relationships and being the most popular girl in school again, and the feelings that come from that, I'm not as focused on the loss and the less. It's become a more gain.
Thank you for that. So Michael asked the question, we often hear that hope is not a plan, but it seems that these times need lots of hope. How can we help people who have hope in such a time? How can we help people have hope in such a time of so much cynicism? I'm going to answer this and then I want to hear your answer because we may have very different answers to this. So, at the beginning of this whole thing, one of the things that really inspired me was to take a fresh look at something called the Stockdale paradox. So those of you who are business leaders have probably read the Jim Collins book, Good to Great. It's still like one of the Bibles of business strategy and execution. And I, for whatever reason, the book was put back in front of me the day that the WHO announced that we were in a global pandemic, and I was freaking the F out. I will be like very, very honest with you. And I happened to open my book and it went right to the chapter that was talking about the Stockdale paradox, what the Stockdale paradox is. And those of you who have been on sessions with me early on, we talked a lot about this, and I did give everybody an exercise with this, but the Stockdale paradox says, so this is based on the experience of Admiral James Stockdale, who previously was a vice presidential candidate, but more importantly, he was, he was in the military and he was imprisoned in a POW camp in Vietnam for 6 years. And what the Stockdale paradox is that he emerged from that experience ready to move forward and in a very, very successful, upwardly mobile way, like really perform at a very, very high level and exceed what he ever expected for his own potential. And so Jim Collins asked him, talk to me a little bit about that experience of being in the POW camp. Who fared well, who didn't fare well, and what was your big learning and what did you take into life? And that's where the Stockdale paradox was born. And here's what the paradox is. So Stockdale explained that the people who were in the POW camp who were using hope as a strategy, hope alone, were the ones who fared the worst. The ones who actually did the best in captivity were the ones who were able to stare the brutal facts of their own reality directly in the face and still maintain hope and optimism. So having that grounding in reality, being able to acknowledge the brutal facts of your own situation and maintaining hope is one of those things that help them fare very well. So Michael, I'll say one of the things that we hand out, which we'll make available in the replay follow-up to this, is our Stockdale Paradox exercise, which basically goes like this. You know, it's a renewal, like a review of what your core purpose is as an organization. Why was I put on this earth? Whether you are an entrepreneur and the leader of a business, or you're a coach, or you're just an individual human being, it's like a renewal, a reminder of like, you know, what is my core purpose here? Why am I here? Second piece is to actually look at what are the brutal facts of my reality and list them out. Third piece is to look at those brutal facts and actually look for the things that you can't change and set them aside and have a plan to deal with them. But more importantly, look at the things that maybe are going to surface some opportunity for you, right? So, you know, this presentation today and me and Kaylin coming together is the result of my Stockdale Paradox exercise, where one of the brutal facts of my reality was like 6 weeks or 6 months that I wasn't going to be on the road speaking. That meant that I was going to have a lot of time on my hands. The opportunity was, how can I use my special gifts and talents to elevate other people and help them through this time? And so, you know, all of a sudden I have a new content series available. And what that's done is it's brought, you know, like I have exponentially grown my community. Like Kaylin, I'm trying to make as many friends as I possibly can through this. And it's been successful. And that's returning dividends to me in many positive ways. So we'll share that Stockdale Paradox exercise. But I'd love, Kaylin, for you to answer the same question, which is like, how can we help people? How can we help people maintain hope? Using the lens of being realistic about the brutal facts of their reality. Like the brutal facts of our reality is like many of us are stuck at home. Some of us, like the brutal facts of my reality right now that scare the shit out of me is that like we've opened up the state and we're letting the COVIDiots out. That's actually scarier to me than staying at home, right? How do we help people maintain hope? And that'll have to be our final thought for today. You're on it. You're on mute, honey.
Just kidding. In 10 seconds or less, it goes back to the big takeaway. Cut out anything that does not give you hope. If it's social media, I don't care how many people you have to unfriend and unfollow right now. Doesn't matter. They're not your people. Get rid of it. Toxic is toxic. I don't care if they're blood or not. Toxic is toxic. If it's in your business, have conversations with that employee who's not hopeful. If it's, you know, if your church is giving you the information you don't need and it doesn't serve you, cut it out. Get rid of what does not serve you right now. And you're going to have a vacuum of what does come at you quick.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Everybody, thank you for sticking around. Kaylin, as always, thank you. I am so grateful for this time. The COVIDiots are out there, so I hope that everybody is going to stay safe. So continue. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Love each other. Please, please, please try to find some time for fun. Like go find the abandoned Volkswagen van if you can, right? All of these things, bring some joy into the world. And thank you, everybody, for letting us spend time with you. Hi, Chanel. I would show you Comet, but she's down here on the floor. You guys are great. You know, we are going to be sharing this replay back out with you. Feel free to share this with friends. I am doing this just out of gratitude for a world that has been really, really good to me. And it's something that I have that I can share with other people to elevate them. I'm in the job of creating irrational loyalty. I am irrationally loyal to this woman here, Kaylin. I can't wait to see you again, but always fun to hang out with you. And I'm grateful to everybody. So everyone have fun and, you know, do the best you can, maintain hope, stare the brutal facts of your own reality in the face, and don't get too sucked into them. And, you know, try to, you know, try to bring some goodness into the world. So I appreciate all of you, and everyone have a terrific week. And maybe you can join us on the Yonder webinar tomorrow. All of the future Brand New World series are listed on my website, debgabor.com/webinar. We should change that to Debinar, right? Trademark, void where prohibited. And Kaylin 66866, text INSPIRE and get on her list to get that weekly inspiration. I'm on the email list and I love those stories. I always read the emails. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Take care. Bye-bye.